Kia ora, and welcome to Aotearoa's Opportunity, a podcast where we talk about fair pay agreements and how they can help us tackle some of Aotearoa's most urgent issues.
In this podcast, everyday workers will be sharing their stories about the issues that they deal with in their industries and how we can discuss solutions that FPAs will have to offer.
So, no mai, haere mai, and welcome to Aotearoa's Opportunity.
Kia ora and welcome to the Aotearoa's Opportunity podcast. There's been a bit of a delay since our last episode of the podcast. This has been largely due to the election result. Given the change of government, we've had to look at our work and recalibrate a bit with the podcast. The new government has indicated that they're likely to scrap fair pay agreements. We feel that would be a huge missed opportunity, but there's still law and we've still got a job to do to talk about what fair pay agreements are for people that are covered by it and why it's important to New Zealand. Aotearoa New Zealand is facing a lot of social and economic issues. There's low wages, there's a lot of issues around inequality and communities that are struggling to get by. Our economy is struggling to provide the skills and capacity that it needs to continue. What fair pay agreements do is provide a mechanism for industry-wide bargaining that would allow us to deal with some of these issues that we're facing. At some point, a mechanism like fair pay agreements is going to be inevitable if we're going to deal with these issues. In today's podcast, we're going to be reflecting on the work the Council of Trade Unions has been doing to campaign for fair pay agreements and try and make them a reality. We've been doing this podcast, it's available for everyone, and a lot of people in fair pay agreement industries have been following it, as well as a lot of other union-minded working people or progressive people who are interested in fair pay agreements. But we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes or in workplaces. And we want to talk a little about that, a little about the lessons we've learned and some indications on a path forward for securing fair pay agreements in the future. To talk more about this, we'll be talking to Una and Oliver, who are fair pay agreement organisers with the Council of Trade Unions. They've spent the last 6 months meeting with workers in different industries where fair pay agreements have been initiated to help inform them and talk about fair pay agreements and to hear their perspectives about what fair pay agreements mean to them. Good afternoon, Una and Oliver.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Oliver. Can you kick us off? Can you tell us a bit about your role and the work you've been doing as fair pay agreement organisers?
So for the last 6 months or so, the main kind of intention behind our role was to raise public awareness around fair pay agreements. When the legislation was passed, it was pretty clear that there was not public awareness about what fair pay agreements were. So a large part of our role was to raise public awareness around fair pay agreements, and then to assist with the fair pay agreement process alongside unions who had initiated fair pay agreements for their respective industries or occupations.
You've basically summed it up, Una. What that meant kind of in practice was that we mostly were helping out a couple of unions, the ones that were the most under-resourced. So Unite Union in particular and First Union have been the main unions that we've been helping out with, but also doing some stuff with Unite, with ETU and with NZDI.
So was that a lot of going out to workplaces where there hasn't been unions before? What was it like going out and talking to people in, say, hospitality and in like cafes that have never had a union visit before? What was the response you got from workers like?
Yeah, it did involve a lot of going into workplaces where people had never heard of a union. People had, it was the first time that anyone was sort of talking to them that wasn't like a customer or someone that's like something to do with their employer or something. So just even breaking, having conversations where we break the wall of like, you're either a customer or someone that's my boss's friend, was quite difficult. And sometimes there were some challenging conversations that we had to have where we had to sort of just sort of explain from the start what a union was, how we had a right to be there, and that we were actually there to help them and we're on their side. And it was a great opportunity to introduce workers to the idea of unions and just like labor relations and the idea that things could change for them and that things could get better, and being able to do that in a way where you actually are face to face with someone, having a conversation where it's like a discussion. And sometimes it's awesome because we had really good employers where you could we would be able to sit down and like workers would come to us and we'd like have a little chat with each one of them and explain everything in full. which is it's really rare to have that kind of opportunity both for them and for us. So yeah, it was great in a lot of ways. Yeah. Sorry. So Ben, would you like to explain for us like exactly why we were hired for this role? Like what was the reasoning from the CTU standpoint for us ending up doing what we were doing?
Yeah, so the CTU recognised this was a huge opportunity to roll out something new, but it was new, and because it was new, it meant we were going to have a whole range of workers who had never talked to a union before, or that were outside of existing union structures, and we needed to help unions provide some extra resource there and provide some capacity. So we did a range of things for that. So part of that is this podcast to try and have some resources for people who are new to fair pay agreements and unions, to have resources available for people to talk about and hear about what unions are, what fair pay agreements are, what we're trying to do, what some of the issues that we're trying to tackle with are. We hired you guys, so your role to sort of come in and work with unions and to do in targeted ways where we can make the biggest impact, but to try and get out into workplaces and talk directly to people and have those sort of questions and one-to-one conversations about what this meant, what this would mean for people working in hospitality or in early childhood centres or whatever else. And that was really helpful to have sort of some extra resources that could come into unions so they could reach all these new people that were going to be covered by mechanisms. And we tried to do a lot of other stuff. So we also provide a lot of logistical and advice and support to unions to explain the process and what they needed to do. We provided a lot of, at times, different an avenue for people to get legal advice about what their obligations in the FPA system was. And my job was sort of coordinating that. So I was helping to coordinate the Fair Pay Agreement podcast that we've sort of been putting together, that you're listening to now, that was being put together by Nick Ahu-Gartner, who's done a fantastic job. Was coordinating our support organisers, and then also working with unions to coordinate their response to fair pay agreements. And it's been a really interesting few months, or about a year since we've came into place. It's been really good to be able to work with unions and work with all these new workers. What was when you went into a workplace and talked to someone who's new about fair pay agreements, what was the most common responses that you saw from talking to say hospitality workers about the fair pay agreements?
I think probably surprise was probably the most common reaction that we got. I think a lot of hospitality workers specifically are used to pretty subpar working conditions, and a lot of hospitality workers, particularly in front of house and in Auckland Central, were students and people who were using hospitality, working in hospitality part-time, and thought, my pay could be better, my hours could be better, my working environment could be better, but it's not, and that's just how it is. And I think, we're really surprised when we came in and explained to them that they were covered by a new law that had been designed to improve working conditions for them. And so I think in part, we're maybe skeptical that something could actually change. And so, we'd talk about how important it would be for them to come to a meeting, and how making a claim and getting involved in this process, their voices would be heard in that process. And I think others, it's definitely difficult to kind of get that idea across. And I think we just needed more time. And I think that everybody that's been involved in this process at the CTU and across all of the unions would agree that it's been a really short time frame between when the first fair pay agreements were initiated and now. So I think, I don't know, what do you think were the main responses, Oliver?
I would say that probably the biggest response that we got was that workers were quite busy at that present moment, a lot of the time. So even just having that conversation would be hard to start in the first place, which in itself is just like a sign of there being like issues within the hospitality industry, for example, like safe staffing and whatnot, and where it's like difficult for us to pull a worker aside or have them take a quick break so that they can talk to us, or even just talk to us for a few minutes when it's quiet, because they're just constantly busy. So that has been a real challenge. And like Una was saying, with more time, then I think there would have been so much potential for it to have like really taken off, especially with when it's hard to have those conversations, just having those sort of repeat visits, going at different times, working out like when it's the quietest time, when a worker's like on a break, and just doing all of that kind of like long-term repeat conversations is where we would have like opportunities to sort of have those conversations and improve workers' awareness and get to the point of actually them understanding what we're doing. And because once workers did understand what we were doing, when they fully comprehended it, and also when they sort of, I guess, got over maybe some of the confusion and maybe some of the fear related to just working and never seeing anything like this before, then they were really interested and would be real likely to come along to a meeting. And also another thing is employers themselves sometimes were quite difficult, not only in terms of just there not being enough time with because of there not being enough staff, but sometimes directly. Like we did have some situations where there were employers who would just not let us talk to the workers. A couple, it was only a few, but there were some situations where we were, workers were like pulled away from conversations with us, like by employers, and that's really hard to get around.
Would you agree that I know you said it's had about a year in total now that you've been working on this mahi, but how has the time frame felt for you? Because I know it's got a lot busier in the last few months, and how is that?
Yeah, so the legislation passed last December, so we've had almost exactly 12 months since it sort of came into place, and we've tried to work through that as quickly as possible because it's such an important piece of work, but that time frame has proven really difficult. I think particularly because it was new. I think had FPAs been in place for a while and all the different parties, both unions and employers and the ministry, had a working understanding of the mechanism and how it would work, then you'd be able to do an FPA in much less time. But being the first ones when a lot of people were still developing their understanding of the mechanism and the law, meant that it's moved much slower than we would have liked. And we've really run out of time now to be able to complete a fair pay agreement. Certainly before the election. They're still in place now, and we're still trying to work on that. But it's proven really difficult to complete a fair pay agreement. And some of that is just the newness of it. Some of it were probably mistakes that some unions made along the way. Other times it has been or appears to be, or some have suggested that there's been a degree of non-cooperation from some parties that has made it more difficult than it needed to be. And so that time is just really important, I guess. I think for big changes and things, it's going to both take time and you need more time to be able to work these things through. But also, you need to, new things don't, an oak tree doesn't grow quickly. So I think that's been sort of one of the things that we've had to deal with. There's been a lot of stuff about understanding the mechanism. When this is so new and it's been such a long time since there's been industry bargaining, and the fair pay agreement process was quite different to other processes like the awards in Australia. Like, I think we say the awards a lot because it's something practical that people can understand, but the way of getting it is very different. So in Australia, the awards are just set by the Fair Work Ombudsman. It's basically a court where you go and you make your case, and they sort of a judge decides. I think this was a much better process because it had a lot of processes for democratic participation, but that then takes time. I think for some people it has created a sense of frustration or allowed things to then sort of basically get timed out, and now there's that political risk to it, which is really frustrating. And I think as well, it hasn't been helpful, or why we've had you guys sort of working. I think the other sort of complication of it, because it's been new, and this sort of time factor, is we're trying to teach all of New Zealand about something quite dramatically new, and that's not simple. And so at the moment, there's about between 250 and 300,000 workers covered by fair pay agreement processes as of today. That's a lot of conversations about what this means, what that would sort of, what people can do to help that process. And what we've been able to do has been a drop in the ocean. It's been an important sort of drop, but it's only been a small sort of part of that. In time, if you allowed that to bed in and become sort of normal for people, then all this process would move a lot quicker, be a lot easier for everyone, even for employers, which has been a little bit outside of our focus because we're from the Council of Trade Union, so we are focusing on workers and unions. But even for employers or for everyone involved, had it been around for longer and people understood it better, it allows it to move a bit quicker and easier. And that's just new, That's the challenge of doing something new. What do you think workers feel now about the FPAs, now that they know that it's in place and that they know this is a mechanism to make their work better? How do you think people, once they got their head around it and had it explained to them and had an opportunity to participate in a fair pay agreement process, what do you think workers feel about FPAs?
Yeah, that's actually quite a timely question, because at the moment we've been talking to a lot of supermarket workers on behalf of First Union, and I think for a lot of workers the FPA mechanism has given them an opportunity to learn about unions. So a lot of people who in hospitality in particular and in retail, a lot of workers who previously had no idea what a union was now are engaged in wanting to know about unions, wanting to join unions, and offering an opportunity for change, for optimism and hope. I just got off the phone with a worker just before recording this, who works at a grocery store in Queenstown, and the kind of place where a union would have, she wouldn't have been informed of a union through any other way. Other than like the fair pay agreement process, and the store that she was working at being defined as being big enough to be defined as a supermarket, and then becoming part of the supermarket fair pay agreement, which is awesome for her. So and there's quite a few other workers like that at New Worlds and other kind of supermarkets where they wouldn't have had union access, and now getting lots of New Worlds signed up to the union. So workers at New World, yeah.
I agree. It's been great. Redirecting the interest and excitement around fair pay agreements into building union membership and engaging workers with their union. I think it's been really, really good, and it's a really difficult time. Obviously, we all know we're in a cost of living crisis, and so I think for a lot of workers, particularly, all fair pay agreements are addressing industries that are and occupations that are essential, and are like the groups of people that we praised so highly during COVID, and then were kind of like put to the wayside, and we seem to forget about them. So fair pay agreements again became like a beacon of hope, right? And then now that's maybe not going to go ahead anymore. So I think to use this as an opportunity to talk about unions in a way that maybe we haven't before in Aotearoa, because we're in such a different space and like social environment now. I think that's been really cool. But it's always going to be, I think, confusing, and it's been definitely difficult to like distill the legislation. Even there's parts of the Fair Pay Agreement Act that I don't understand. So I think props to everybody that's been doing that. This podcast, I think, has done that really well. And I think there's a lot of like lessons learned for everybody during this, which is great.
So Ben, would you like to be able to talk a bit about the FPA meetings and how these worked out in terms of bringing workers together?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing sort of coming on from what Una says, like we've got this opportunity to do something new and bring, people together and rebuild that sort of understanding about workers and collectivity and stuff. And part of that for the fair pay agreement process was that under a fair pay agreement, workers have a right to have meetings and to get together with other people from not just their workplace but across their group, whether that's the industrial group or the occupational group, to talk about the issues that they're facing and the solutions to it, what they would like to see improved, and to sort of to share that and do that collectively and democratically. And so the fair pay agreements that have advanced that far enough through the process, the bus industry, hospitality, security, and early childhood education have all had those sort of meetings in different ways, and different unions have tackled it differently as well. But it's been a really interesting and quite exciting sort of process. I think that's gone easier where there's like stronger union organisation. So in the bus industry, you've already got about 40% of people in the union or in the different unions. There's multiple of them. But the fair pay agreement process allowed other people who are in ununionised parts of the bus industry to come along, and also the unions that sometimes work together but sometimes hadn't worked together as much as they'd like to sort of get together as a group. And it really allowed people to sort of get a better understanding about the challenges they're facing in an industry, and that it's not just a problem with one depot or one company or one regional council, but there were some real structural issues, and start talking about that on a scale that can actually deal with it, which is really exciting. The meetings were harder I think in hospitality, because it's such an industry where there's pockets of unionisation in Sky City or in fast food, but a lot of places where it's quite new, and that proved to be quite a high bar for people to come along. But I think the people who did go along to hospitality meetings had a good time, because it was something totally new for people that, hey, we can get together and discuss, these issues. What was it like for you? Because you guys went to a lot of the meetings up in Auckland and stuff. How were they? What were your experience with those meetings?
The meetings really varied, obviously varied industry to industry. Although I think, it's safe to say that a lot of hospitality workers were, for a number of different reasons, not willing to walk off the job. And so I think that's a big reason why there wasn't huge turnout. However, I think also it's again, post-COVID, logistically, the turnout to the Zoom meetings was really good for hospitality. And across all of those, it was really great to see when it came around to kind of having an open discussion about what the gaps in the industry, where the gaps are in the industry in terms of support, that's been written into legislation, whether that's penal rates, blocking around sick leave, whatever it may be, gaps in terms of worker protection. And a worker would raise something else, and you could see the other workers at the meeting thinking, oh my God, yeah, absolutely. I've just been kind of assuming that this is normal, but actually it's not. And feeling a sense of rapport and feeling understood. I think that was really great to see workers talking in that way. And it's really cool that fair pay agreements offered that platform for those discussions to happen. And I hope that that's something that will continue post this time. Oh yeah, also Ben, what about you? Because we didn't really manage to get to any of the bus FPA meetings, but you were quite involved with those. What were those meetings like?
They were really really good. There was that sort of sense of that collectivity, and bringing new people into it, I think, was the exciting thing, because I think it was different because you had there's aspects of the bus industry that have been unionised for a very long time. There's the Tramways Union, which still exists even though there hasn't been trams for 50 years. It just sort of shows how, around they are, and they're not going anywhere. But it was the exciting thing for those was bringing in new people and new depots and places that currently aren't part of the union, and bringing them into a framework where they could talk about issues they were facing and seeing that was exciting, and also as a framework to get beyond. For the bus industry, where there's a lot of collective agreements, negotiations with individual employers. They're quite used to that, but a lot of issues around rostering and contracts and stuff go bigger and go to issues that touch on public policy, either through the regional councils or through the government via Waka Kotahi and the like. And so it opened at the fair pay agreement process, and those meetings were open, and it was able to sort of take the conversation to a higher level and stuff beyond companies that are operating sometimes between really narrow frameworks. So that was really interesting and exciting.
I just wanted to just talk or something that Una said earlier in terms of just continuing some stuff on the meetings. But yeah, like when for us, like when the meetings did happen, when there was a successful meeting, it really was an amazing experience. And there was one particular situation that I think I'm always going to remember, which is this time when I was talking to a worker who worked in fast food, or a couple of workers who they were two guys that were in high school. They were kind of joking around at work. And then when I talked to them, I got them interested in coming along to the meeting. They were like, "Oh, cool! I'd love to just leave work early and come to a meeting. We'll just doing it for that reason, no other reason other than just like both egging each other on to leave work and go to the meeting and just seeing how it goes." And when they came to the meeting, I just remember seeing their faces and seeing them interact with some of the other workers there, and just realizing that it was so much bigger than what they first thought, and coming along basically as a joke turned out to be something that would have potentially changed the way that they sort of understand work and their relationship to their jobs. So that was a great experience to witness.
Yeah. And I think it speaks, if you're listening to this and you haven't gone to a meeting before, if we're being frank, saying to people like, come to a meeting with strangers about your workplace sounds like dog shit. Like that, for a lot of people, it's just like, I don't want to go to my workplace. Why would I want to go to another place with other random individuals to talk about a place that I don't want to spend more time than I need to be in? Like that is, if we're reasonable, that is like a reasonable response, which I think a lot of people sort of had, and you talk to people about like, hey, do you want to come to this meeting? And even sometimes you'd see people smiling and nodding, but you can see behind the eyes, they're like, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. Like I understand that, and that's true. But if you're listening to this, like you should go. It will not be dog shit. It will not be like boring. It is actually a good feeling to get together with people who are just like you, who are, the realities of our economic life is that no one, I think, works or some people like making food and service and you take pride in your job, but like a lot of people, if you're working in a fast food restaurant, you're not likely to be doing that because you've got like a God-inspired urge to give people shitty food. Like you're there because you have a need to attain money to sustain your lifestyle, doing the things that you do like to enjoy. So you agree to give up some of your time to a big company to work for them, but it is a positive and empowering experience to get to other people who are in that situation to talk about and strategize about how you can make that better and more advantageous to you is an enjoyable thing. And I think we will get that. I think we can have a culture of solidarity where people understand that. But the way we get that is by reaching new people and building that experience and building that understanding. Having many, many, many conversations with people, and not everyone will get it, but there are people who do. And the more people who we do and the more times we do that, the more we get used to using that muscle of solidarity, the better we will get at that. And the more enjoyable, the more dynamic these kind of meetings and processes can be. So wrapping it up, fair pay agreements face a uncertain future, shall we say? Quite possibly, probably terminally uncertain. What do you think about a future for fair pay agreements in New Zealand or something like that? What is your, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm sure Una has probably quite a lot to say on this, but at least for me, the things that were brought up sort of at the start in terms of the issues of cost of living and stuff becoming a lot more difficult, fair pay agreements have demonstrated themselves or as a solution to that, or as a possible sort of way of for workers to respond to issues of of cost of living like challenges, as well as climate issues and just things in general becoming a lot more difficult in coming years. And it has been really challenging sometimes for us to get that message across, especially from the position that we're in, and especially in terms of what was going on politically at the time that we were operating. I think the fair pay agreements being sort of shown as an opportunity for change to happen wasn't really done to the extent that at least I was satisfied with. However, I do believe that they were doing that, like at least not within the media, but at least at the actual like in-person level that unions are operating on. There was we were seeing big changes happen. Unions have been growing because of it. And I feel like that's still happening now, even though they're likely to be scrapped by the incoming government. I do believe that there's been sort of like an upswell and sort of awareness around labor-related issues, and maybe they'll return in some other form. We know that there's like a real desire, a real hunger for something like fair pay agreements to exist in Aotearoa, especially considering that they exist in one form, or like something very similar exists in Australia, and it's like potentially one of the major reasons why lots of people move to Australia, why people get paid better in Australia, is because of this mechanism. And the more that people realize that, the more we're going to be wanting something like that over here. That's how. So I see it kind of as likely to happen in some form or another. And we just need to be like, as people like that are part of the labor movement, we need to be making sure that the way that they do happen is the best possible way, or like results in the best possible outcomes for workers. Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Yuna?
Yeah, I don't think that this is the end of having really solid industrial relations and like legislation in place that requires that employers treat their workers well, better than well, and pay them well and pay them with a wage that they can live a life with dignity. And I think, like, I don't know, I think this is not, it was definitely, it's been difficult talking to workers, seeing something light up in their eyes, and like, oh my God, like this, my life could be better, but I could still be working in this job. I could be working in this job and not have to live like week to week and pick up hours that I don't really have the time to do, but have to do. And that change could come from somewhere externally, from them having to like make a big sacrifice or change work or move. And then, but that not being a certain thing was definitely really difficult. But as Oliver said, like there's definitely an appetite for change. Obviously, it's, I think, like widely felt that we need that change, and maybe moving forward, that needs to come from, I mean, working people know that this would be incredible, but I think it's really important that the public know that we need this as well. And I think a huge point of this whole process and mechanism that like surprised a lot of people, surprised myself, when I kind of started to understand that it is really strange that we don't have something like an FPA here, and that we used to and we should. And so I think maybe raising awareness around that, and thinking about where we can build solidarity, where we can flex the muscle of solidarity.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I thought I'd just add to that, in terms of what you were saying before about when we were talking to workers and where it was a little bit hard for them to maybe fully get on board when there wasn't like it wasn't a certain thing, there wasn't like a guarantee that it would happen. And I think we were sort of waiting for the moment where an FPA would pass in an industry, and then workers will be able to see for themselves that it is like a real thing, and that like this is something that can make a massive difference to people's lives. And once that ball, if that ball had started rolling, and then workers would have like heard about this industry that had this whole thing happen, then the awareness would take place. Then workers can be like, okay, like I'm keen, like let's have this happen for us. That's so great that these guys are having it better. Like let's do it. And once that starts, if there's a new form that fair pay agreements may take, then if we can get it to the point where workers can actually materially start seeing for themselves the benefits of in the like sector-wide agreements, then it'd be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And all this stuff, I think, internationally we're a bit out of joint, as you know, was sort of saying. I think it'll happen at some point. Like whether I think the economy needs it. We need to be able to stop losing talented people overseas. We need to stop contracting things into the dirt. We need to be able to protect and build some sort of capacity in New Zealand economically. I think politicians come and go, like we've got a stage of go, things will change in the future. That will sort of be as it is. For me, I think the key thing from it though, as well, like just is worth always keeping in mind from a union perspective and stuff as well, like, whether or not there's organised workers is really a choice of workers as well. Something worth keeping in mind when we do have legislation change that's not helpful to making things better, and that's sort of frustrating. It's bad for the economy, it's bad for working people, it's bad for so many reasons if that happens. But that may happen. Politicians have made bad decisions in the past, and they'll probably make bad decisions in the future as well. But in terms of what drives the workers' movement and what the key decision maker in whether or not there is going to be unions is really not politicians. It's certainly not employers. They'd happily make that decision tomorrow and not have unions if they could. And it's not even to be honest, us, who work for unions, we're here to work with workers. But the decision about whether unions exist and whether we can make things better is with working people. And if people come in tomorrow and say, you know what, fuck it, I do want to try and make this a bit better. I don't like getting screamed at by my manager, or I don't like working for minimum wage. I'd like to do something about that. Who's with me? Then that's where all possibility starts from, And as long as there's people who keen to do something, and then there's possibilities of making change, and that change will come. That's how I view it anyway. Cool. I think that's the questions we had and where we got to the end of the podcast. So thank you, Una and Oliver, for being on the podcast and all the work you've been doing on trying to assist fair pay agreements. Thank you to all the workers who have politely talked to you and given you content for this podcast as well. Again, thank you, Nick, for doing the podcast, and thank you everyone for listening. If you're listening to Aotearoa's Opportunity for the first time, welcome. Please have a look back at the back catalogue. There's some really interesting stuff about fair pay agreements and general workers and unions information which might be useful for people. If you do like the podcast and that this has been useful to you, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends and colleagues. Just get a big Sharpie and write it on the board at your workplace that listen to this podcast. It's meant people give it a go, and help spread the word. Thank you. Have a great Solidaritous day.
Oh, baby, I love that you hate me. Please know I do understand. Step by step, I'm getting closer to you. Hold my breath, roll my best to show I'm loving you. Never beat my heart, I need a beat to blacker, yeah. Wear my bed sheets like a ball dress, rock it. Know my bicker well, got them tricks and spells. Tongue in cheek works well, ends in loving. step, step by step, I see you walking away. Now I know, I better walk your way.